show you recording in progress.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got to figure out how to disconnect this thing.
Okay, let's hear it now. That's good, Tom. You muted your phone. It's okay. Oops. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Montana State Library Commission work session for the proposed amendments to Administrative Rule 10.102.1159 pertaining to the required open hours standard.
Let's make it 9 o'clock.
And also Administrative Rule 10.102.1160 pertaining to the Montana State Library Continuing Education and Certification Program. I would like to welcome Lieutenant Governor Kristen Juris, who will be here to help us. And we also need to welcome and introduce our new commissioner, Chris Goss. He is the librarian here at Helena College, where we are right now. Thank you for hosting us here. And he has been appointed by the Commissioner of Higher Education from the Montana University System. Okay, Lieutenant Governor, we certainly appreciate your willingness to guide us through this rare rule-making process, and we would appreciate your insight. And I'll be asking you to kind of take over here in just a minute. We'll begin with the open hours administrative rule. A recurring concern in the public comments is that a reduction in the required number of hours could be misinterpreted as evidence that local libraries do not need the current level of support, potentially leading to further local funding cuts. A worry for many of the commenters, but one person did appreciate the flexibility that would come from this open hours standard. Jenny has a memo that she was going to review for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Scribner. During the public hearing on November 3rd, the commission was asked a question regarding whether or not the prompting to change this administrative rule was motivated by libraries seeking deferrals for this particular standard. And so staff compiled recent data about libraries' ability to meet this standard as reported through the Public Library Standards and Survey process going back to 2021, just after the pandemic. Since 2021, 98% of libraries have reported in their standards they meet this particular standard. In 2023, 2 libraries requested deferrals for this standard due to budgetary and staffing concerns. Those deferrals were granted, and those 2 libraries were able to meet the standard in the next year. In 2025, 1 library requested a deferral for this standard, and that request was granted. Additionally, in your memo, you have information about libraries reporting their ability to meet those standards, broken out by the total number of libraries meeting the standards. Currently, 89% of libraries exceed the minimum standard. And then that information is also broken out by service area population as is defined in the current standard. And as you can see, on average, libraries are exceeding the current number of open hours. Madam Chair.
All right. Lieutenant Governor, could you take it from here for us?
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you again for your service, and welcome to Chris Goss. And as many of you probably know, Chris is also an attorney, and I'm sure he'll bring some good insights and perspectives. My main purpose of being here is I realize for you, this may be one of the first times that you have gone through the process of rulemaking, and just make sure that you understand your responsibilities and roles in this process. So there has been the public hearing where comments were received. You have received written comments, and your responsibility now is to, for each of these proposed rules, discuss the comments that were received and determine if any, based on the comments, you want to adopt the rules as proposed without making changes, or if you want to make some changes to the proposed rules. It's also an obligation in the rulemaking process, and your staff is going to help you with this. In the adoption notice, which, as I said, either adopts as proposed or adopts with amendments, you need to summarize the comments received and prepare a response to those comments as to why you either reviewed them and used them to make a change, or you reviewed them but determined that in spite of the comments and the concerns, you still believed that it was appropriate to adopt the rule as proposed. So I think where you would begin, commissioners, is to start with, as you noted, Chair, there was one proponent comment and then several opposing comments that you would discuss among yourselves some of the concerns raised in those comments that were opponents, and determine if there are any changes that you would want to make to the rules as proposed.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with the one that is a proponent. I don't need to read it, do I? Lieutenant
No,
Governor?
you do not need to read it. These were provided in advance, and I'm assuming that all of you have had a chance to review them so that you're ready to discuss the comments.
Right, right. Okay, so go ahead. Does someone have any comments?
Madam Chair,
Tom, go ahead.
I'll just summarize the proponent. This respondent said there's no point in being open at times when people don't use the library. And they had altered some of their hours. And quote, this change also helped enormously with staff coverage. And so the flexibility that they had implemented even locally was helpful in their staffing requirements. And then, if it's appropriate, I comment on some of the notes I made on the further pages. Is that okay, Chair?
Let's continue with the proponent first. Does anybody else have a comment concerning the proponent? I did notice that they said that they still met the required hours of now, of what we require right now. They still did meet those required hours, even though they did cut down on some of theirs. Correct? Is that what? Yes. Okay.
Correct. But they also said, this respondent said that they can imagine that this would be helpful to other libraries that have staffing or budget constraints.
Does anybody else have any comments?
I would just like to mention that per law, the local government is supposed to finance 70% of the library's operating budget. So since that's the majority of an operating budget, there should be local decision making should be respected. And I like the fact that this rule change would give more flexibility for individual libraries to make changes to their weekly hours, and they can spread them out differently throughout the year. So I think that's basically a good move to allow for more flexibility locally.
Madam Chair,
Tammy?
someone on our phone call last week mentioned or asked, are we doing this so that we can help locals justify not funding their libraries? And I just want to make clear that was never a part of the discussion. I don't know where that came from.
Does anyone else have any comments?
I'm curious as to the flexibility part seems to be what is more favorable, but we also included reducing number of hours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There are two parts, Madam Chair. The ability for a local library to to reduce hours if needed, if they determine in their local control authority. And the other part is that they get to average the hours and report them for a yearly basis, so that during slack periods, they don't have to be open as much, and they can apply those required hours to the other more busier, the other busier times of the year.
Tom, when you brought this up, I visualized the whole thing as being giving the local control back to them as much as possible for how it worked best for the library locally.
Madam Chair, I'll respond to that. Yes, and this does not impose any direction, a directive to reduce hours. And it's very unlikely that most libraries would. So this is a freedom measure. It reduces restrictions on local trustees and their governance of the library.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Carmen?
I would like to point out that 89% of libraries, as per the state librarian's memo, already exceed the current standard. So to me, that indicates that libraries respond to their local circumstances. And if we introduce more freedom or flexibility for them to do it, I don't think those 89% of libraries are going to decide to cut down their hours based on this rule. If they're already exceeding the current standard, they will simply continue to do what's best for their local community. So I have no concerns really that this change would lead to libraries going, you know, yeehaw, now we don't have to serve the public so well anymore, we can cut back our hours. I don't expect that any library would do that.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the opponent comments. Okay, as I said in my opening, that a reoccurring concern in the public comments is that a reduction in the required number of open hours could be misinterpreted as evidence, like you were just saying, Carmen, that nobody's going to say yeehaw, that local libraries do not need the current level of support, potentially leading to further local funding. Does anybody have anything else that they garnered from the opponent?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Tom.
So one of the respondents said there's concern that cutting hours might send the wrong message to local governments. Response: then don't.
Yeah.
That's
Then
on
don't.
page 2 of my printout. And we saw that repeatedly in the comments. On page 5 of my printout, quoting, "I am against reducing the number of open hours requiring paid staff to be on duty." Then don't. It is well known that reducing the minimum for just about anything will mean some areas reduce service. Then don't. It doesn't incentivize anyone to reduce hours to save money. It doesn't incentivize at all. It allows decisions to be made locally. There's a quote on the bottom of page 6. Diminished requirement gives the message to local government, this is repeating, that library services are not important. Then certainly don't. This is between the authority at the local, this is at the discretion of the local authority. And the state is increasing the amount of flexibility by the rule change.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Yes.
one thought that I think I encountered as I read the comments and listened to the session last week is it's not the library boards themselves that are worried about the message that it would be sent with the standard and the number of hours required being reduced. It would be the message to other local government entities such as county commissions. And with 70% of the budget being generated locally and law requiring, in the Attorney General's opinion, outlining budgetary authority being set by the county commission, that creates a potential conflict between county commissions and library boards. Whereas the county commission setting a budget could then utilize the standard. And I think this is the message that we're hearing from the public comment, that the budget could be reduced at the county level, leaving less budgetary authority for the library board to have operations based on an open hour standard that's been reduced. And so I think taking into account that component of this is important, given the financial relationship between library boards and local government agencies, the county commissions or city commissions. So that's something that we have to take into account, is that relationship and how this reduction could play a role in those discussions.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Peggy.
that was the point that I picked up on also, that we're giving the local control, but the libraries, and there was a significant list of them, are concerned about that financial component with their commissioners and their county, whoever is their budget person.
Madam
Madam-
Chair.
Go ahead, Tom.
Um, If that happened, it just indicates where the authority for the governance of the library is. These are the people who appoint the trustees and approve the budget. And we just have to acknowledge that the state law establishes them as the authority over those matters, and not the staff or the trustees.
Madam Chair.
Carmen did have something to say. Tammy first.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Carmen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm briefly going to put on the hat of a public library trustee up here in Flathead County. And we have to make our yearly budget, and we have to defend our budget to the county commissioners. Never has any basic standard administrative rule requirement come up as a justification for our budget. We justify it by, look how many more people we're serving, look how many materials get checked out, and we look at these numbers that we have thanks to the state library collecting the data, but we have never used an administrative rule standard to justify our budget. And I find that, frankly, an odd argument to put forward, because the county commissioners are looking at the library in the context of everything else they provide for county residents. And that's how they make up their budget. Who gets served? How much money do we have available as a county? And then it gets apportioned. And something like, you have to be open X hours. We've never needed to pull that out to justify our budget. So maybe other public libraries do it differently, but we always point to, here's our building needs, here's how many of your county residents are served by us, here's how important we are. And that's how we defend our budget, not with some administrative rule standard. So I was actually surprised when I heard that there might be libraries that use this standard to defend their budget, because to me, it doesn't say much about how well you're serving your local community.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
Oh, Tammy, sorry.
That's
second.
right. I had 3 quick points. I want to keep going back to what Tom said. If any librarian and their trustees feel like this could provide or cause a political division or a monetary problem between their governing and them, then don't do it. We're not, you've got that freedom. Don't make that cut. Secondly, I think that from what you have expressed, and I did hear that too last week, that it's an encouragement to have better communication between the county commissions and the libraries on what they are doing and justifying that they are providing to people. And that probably would be a really beneficial process for some of the libraries to look at, is to have really sell themselves to those funding bodies. And thirdly, I guess I would point out to Chris, we have huge diversity in our libraries and how they actually, some are private libraries, some are run by the city, some are run by counties, some are run by private entities, some are on the reservations and they're tribal. So they're, I appreciate the people who say this might be a problem with us in our county commissioner, but I would be careful of making that too broad-based.
Someone else had another comment.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Tom.
thank you. I'm quoting from page 13 of my printout. This respondent said the open hours as they currently read represent a long considered compromise between the ideal, lots of open hours, and the real fiscal and logical constraints libraries contend with while keeping their doors open. In a few instances, this might actually save a small library.
Yeah. It could be really beneficial, and especially around the holidays. It could help them get good people and stay too.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Carmen.
One more, just for clarification, how the local budgeting process works is the library as a county department has unusual independence. So the county can only give us a limit on the total amount they give to us locally. They cannot tell us where we have to spend it. So we decide our emphasis is on new chairs, or our emphasis is on expanding our hours, or we decide that we need to cut the hours in order to buy more materials because our collection is aging, whatever it is. So we locally have that flexibility. So again, I don't think this standard alone can justify your budget because all the county gives you is the total amount. This is different from other county departments where the county has more influence in exactly where the money goes. As a library, we have, as a board, the unusual power to completely determine where the money goes once we have been given the total amount. So that gives the trustees a lot of flexibility what to do. And if they decide in their community, we really need to be open more, our most important thing is the meeting room, and we need to be open till 10 o'clock at night, they have that flexibility within their budget to cut something else and make that possible. So I just want to point out that local flexibility that's there. Thank you.
I do remember when we had a conversation with the librarians, it seems like we were in Missoula. I do remember one of the a few of the libraries talking about their fight to get money for their libraries. And that is just a concern for me, because if they did look at that and say, if the commissioners, if whoever their budget is, a city library, whatever, if they did look at that and say, well, but the state says, and so that's my concern. And I can see that I can see their concern. I'm wondering if we added a statement to this, and I prepared it. I was wondering if we could say the reduced open hours requirement is not a signal that libraries need less support. It reflects trust in local leaders to align hours with actual community use as measured by the Public Library Survey. This change uses existing data to support flexibility without altering funding formulas or eligibility rules. I mean, that if we added something like that, perhaps.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Are you proposing that language in your adoption notice where you give that language in support of adoption of the rules versus actually as a part of the text of the rule itself?
Well, I don't know if it can be part of the text of the rule itself. What do you say?
I would recommend that not be part of the text of the rule itself, but it certainly could be included in a statement as to why you adopted
Okay,
the
okay,
rules.
so,
Madam Chair,
yes,
I'm torn on this. I see what you're saying, and we did hear at least one person say, question our motive. Where is this motive coming from for this change? And is this a negative to encourage our funders to cut back? Which is not true at all. So a bit of me feels like to make a statement like that is sort of like I'm not beating my wife. I'm making a statement. When you don't need to make the statement because you're not beating your wife. And we're not doing that. And so it kind of feels like we might be responding to a couple of negative people that are questioning what doesn't need to be questioned. Now, maybe I'm out of line with that, and I'd be glad to hear that. We heard from so many people who thought this was a great idea and didn't seem, saw it in such a positive light that I'm not sure I want to back myself into a corner of making a statement that sounds like we have to justify it.
okay, did we hear from a lot of people saying that they like this?
That's exactly what my question was. Where, I only remember one.
Was
Chair,
Yes, Tom?
there was a person when this, at a live meeting that we held at the State Library building in Helena, who came and sat patiently. This was a library director, and waited for the public comment period several hours and commented that this would be a great help to their library. And this is a middle-sized library.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
how did we arrive at the figures that are being proposed? The 10.5 hours, 21 hours, 28 hours? Was that based on statistics or data from the state library that had been collected based on the number of deferrals that had been requested? Or how did these hours, average number of hours, where did they emerge from?
Madam Chair, could I respond to that?
Yes, please.
So library visitation is down by, in most libraries, it is down in most libraries. About 10 or a dozen around the state of our 108 that we monitor are up. But overall, the physical visitation is down. I think on average, over the last decade, I think the 24 numbers compared to 2013 were about 33%. So it's just kind of a rough spitball to respond to changing use.
Madam
That's
Chair?
That's why 30% was applied as kind of an arbitrary number, but it had some basis in the library patronage.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I would like to add to this point. The fact that visitation is down, I think, reflects a turn towards ebooks and different ways for people to get their reading materials and access reading. And you can do that 24 hours, whether the library is open or not, because it's simply online. So that change is happening kind of fits with the visitation numbers being down, and it makes me wonder about the physical locations, and it makes me actually more prone to give more local control depending on how your community is responding to this trend. And I've looked at this too in the context of my own library and trying to compare to figure out if Flathead County Libraries is doing something wrong, because our numbers are down a little bit. They have come way back after the pandemic, thank goodness. But still, physical visitation is shifting because of the shift to ebooks and online content. And within that context, I think it makes sense, actually, not only to give more flexibility by making the statistical period of looking at hours not a week but a year, and also possibly allowing local libraries to invest more in their online platforms rather than having their physical plant open. I think that trend in physical visitation would actually encourage the change we're making. And this is not a thought I had before, but Commissioner Burnett bringing this up makes me feel that it's probably a good thing, and maybe we're ahead of the curve a little bit by allowing libraries to be more flexible with their physical opening hours so that they can invest more in online resources, because people are sadly, moving that way. Thank you.
Are there anyone else have a comment?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have one more thing. One person during the live hearing encouraged us to write this rule better to make it more clear. Do we think it's not clear? Do we need to respond to that concern about the wording? Or do we feel that it is clear the way it is written right now?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Tom?
could I ask Jenny, State Librarian, to read the rule as it stands, please?
Just give me one moment.
I have it, Jenny, if you'd like me to read it.
Here, I have it here.
Okay.
The proposed change would say the library is open during convenient hours. On average, the library is opened the following number of hours weekly as reported by the library in the annual public library survey. So the language is tied to that reporting. And to be clear, the definition of how open hours are reported in the National Public Library Survey is an average over a year, as opposed to the weekly hours that are currently called for in administrative rule.
Madam Chair, that rule wording seems pretty clear to me.
I agree.
Madam Chair, I think the person who raised that issue during the live hearing was wondering, how about the calculation of average? Jenny just mentioned that maybe if there's an additional explanation as to how that average is calculated or would be calculated or is sought to be calculated to ensure proper compliance. You said it's on an annual basis,
It's on an
calendar year,
A calendar.
fiscal,
It may be on fiscal year, but I would have to check on that.
so it's total number of hours open over the
Course
year
of a
divided
year.
by 56.
I guess I'm having a little bit of trouble telling the difference between our purpose of listening to the points brought up and reading them and responding to them fairly, And now they're a matter of record. On the one hand, that seems very reasonable to me. But on the other hand, it seems like some people are suggesting that we go further and that we respond in writing or in the rule itself to all these concerns people brought up. And I'm not comfortable doing that because I think, one, it's a really good idea that Tom brought up. I would never have thought of it, but I really appreciate it. I have heard from people who say, wow, this is going to help our library not have to be open on holidays when we can't staff it, and do this and that, and round farmer schedules and these kinds of things. I think we're being respectful towards the people who have concerns, and hearing them and responding to them and sharing. Some of them are not accurate. We are saying you don't have to be worried about that. We're not trying to undermine you. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to give you more local control, and not feeling like we have to respond to all of those concerns. I think that's how you go from a policy book that's reasonable side to a policy book the size of the bills that the US Congress puts in. And that's because you respond to every single little compliment, comment, complaint, concern, rumor, worry, gossip. I think we should be above all that. I think it reads clear. It's a good rule. And we can justify the concerns that people have brought up by just reminding them nobody has to do this. It's in their hands. And please communicate better with your county commissioners what you're doing and why you need funding.
Madam Chair, another question. Lieutenant Governor, would it be possible to propose an amendment that changes the word desirable to recommended within that table?
Yes, you can amend, and as long as the any proposed amendments to the rule are not a significant departure, you can go ahead and amend and adopt as amended to take into account some comments that were received. So an amendment like that would be an allowable amendment that you could adopt without need for a further hearing on the proposed amendment.
So we could just decide now to change that one word without a vote, without anything.
Yes, you could, upon motion, propose an amendment to that one word,
Okay.
and
And what was?
approve it.
I'm looking for the word you're talking about. Could you give me better guidance on it?
Yeah, it's
Madam Chair,
On the chart. On the chart, Tammy.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Carmen.
could we, for everybody, put the rule as it is worded on the screen so we can
Yes.
see that change easier? Just put it on everybody's screen.
Second.
Victoria, I'll send it to you in chat so you have it for in Teams.
I like that proposed change of the word because we should set minimum requirements to assure that the taxpayer money that goes to local libraries goes to well-run, legit libraries. And so to say that a standard is desirable is not really correct, because we already see that 89% of libraries are above it. So to call that desirable is really not correct. I like the word required much better.
Yeah, that would make a big difference. What do you? Okay, do you see it, everybody? Where the desirable is in the last column?
No,
No, I can't see it.
It's the heading,
I do.
It's the column heading.
In the table.
the column, yeah, in the table. The chart there says service area population, and then over it says minimum, and then over it says desirable at the top.
And you are proposing that we change What word?
The word desirable, I think there's a way to send the signal that Commissioner Scribner offered, rather than including a sentence in the rule. Maybe that could be the signal to the communications that you're emphasizing, Commissioner Hall, between library boards and county commissions, city commissions, or tribal councils, to say this column is what we can be focused on. These are the minimums, but this column is what we're striving to achieve to ensure excellence for our patrons and maximize the use of our resources. So maybe desirable isn't the right word. I don't know if we need to get the thesaurus out, but that could be adjusted to send that same signal and meet that intent. And the word that I had offered was recommended, or maybe it's required. Desirable does seem a little
Loosey-goosey.
fuzzy. Yeah, a lot of different ways to describe it, maybe.
I wouldn't change it to required.
Yeah, I
The
wouldn't either.
minimum is what's required, but desirable to recommended certainly may add clarity.
Yep, my apologies, I had the wrong word, yep.
What word did you have?
Well, Brian actually suggested recommended.
Chris, but
Brian has more hair than I do.
oh goodness.
Recommended. That's
Right.
not bad.
Recommended would be
Or goal.
goal.
Mhm.
Madam Chair, a question for a state librarian. I would guess that most libraries fall pretty close into that column that's labeled presently desirable. Can you give a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Burnett, I would point you to the memo that's included in your meeting materials, especially the last chart, where it calls attention to the average hours reported by population served. As you can see, for example, in the lowest category of population served, while the current minimum is 15 open hours, the average number of open hours reported is over 30 hours.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
For me, changing the word desirable to recommended, that changes it for the better. If we could let the librarians know that this is not, and their boards, that this is not a recommended cut in hours. Like you said, Tammy, I mean, we're not, I mean, there's no way we can just say, well, if you don't want to do this, then don't, but
Madam Chair,
yes, Carmen.
looking again at Jenny's memo, the state librarian's memo, and the number of libraries that are above the required minimum amount right now, that does not look to me like those libraries had to use the required hours to justify their budget. They're already above it.
Mhm.
So to me, that answers that concern that it will lead to a cut in budget. I don't see that in this data that the libraries actually had to use that desperately to defend their budgets if they're already above those hours. The vast majority of them anyways, that minimum requirement, they didn't need to use that apparently because they're above it. So I think that answers I think that's my response to that concern. I don't see any evidence that libraries have had to desperately cling to the required minimum to justify their budgets, because most of them are above it anyways.
I'm going to let Jenny comment to that for just 1 second.
Thank you, Commissioner Scribner. Commissioner Cuthbertson, I agree. We're in a very fortunate situation that most of Montana's libraries are well supported. And in fact, some libraries are choosing to increase their hours. And as you said, that is a way of supporting our patrons, which is a measure of excellence that we want to encourage. From time to time, and it doesn't happen frequently, as you can see in the data, but from time to time, there is a library where their community may be facing financial challenges, and they have called upon this standard in order to justify a funding request. And I know I have been asked to provide documentation of this required standard to local governments when a library is facing those kinds of challenges. And as you can see in the data, 3 different libraries have had to request a deferral. They've been able to then recover from that situation that they were in. So it's in those instances where a library is facing a hardship, or perhaps their local government is facing a financial hardship, where this standard becomes important.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Carmen?
if the local community is experiencing financial hardship, I want them to have the flexibility to deal with their budget locally. And, you know, if in the county context, if it comes to, do we maintain the landfill or do we keep the library 10 hours open more? I want the county and the taxpayers and the voters in the county free to make that decision. Our county provides sewage treatment, roads and bridges, a library, parks and rec, the county landfill. So I see my library in the context of all these county functions, and there has to be power locally each and every year to make nuanced decisions. And if your county experiences an outflow of taxpayers and people, and suddenly your budget is cut in half, every county department needs to be able to handle that. So I'm in favor of allowing budgetary freedom for the local city or county to fund all their different departments appropriately, depending on their overall financial situation.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I need to leave for a cabinet meeting shortly, but I just want to say your discussion is exactly what is supposed to be happening. You don't have to read in detail each comment. You have read them already, and you are picking up, for example, a recurring comment made throughout several is, you know, the concern that somehow this could lead to reduced funding. So keep doing what you're doing. As I mentioned, if you do want to amend the proposed notice, that would be in the form of a motion to amend, for example, to change desirable to recommended, and then you would vote to adopt the rule as amended if that is what your ultimate motion is, or and continue to do that then through the second rule that you face. One last comment I'll make is sometimes comments are made that are outside the scope of the rulemaking. For example, there was one comment that got into some concerns that libraries don't have easy access to an attorney, which may be a very valid concern, but it's outside the scope of these particular rules.
Yes.
So you don't have to address comments outside of the scope of the rules. And then in the written adoption notice, any comments that are outside of the scope would be noted outside of the scope. And in the written adoption notice, you don't have to address each comment singularly. You can, when comments express a theme throughout, such as the concern about impact on budgets, you can simply say several commenters made this comment rather than repeating yourself. So with those notes, thank you again for your service. You're doing a good job, and I'm going to sign off unless there's any last questions.
Lieutenant Governor, I have one quick question for you. This is Jenny. We are planning for action on these rules at the December business meeting. And so is it appropriate that any motions to recommend changes to the rules happen at that meeting?
Yes, but this committee could propose a recommendation
To that,
to take to the full commission.
great, that's what we're
So
planning.
you can do that. Mhm. Good question. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor Kristen.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I looked up a few of the thesaurus words. Instead of desirable, my feeling is we need to avoid words such as recommended that sound like they're coming from us down, and rather go to words that emphasize a bubbling up of what's best for them, that they're, this is best for them and it's bubbling up. And a few of those words that jumped out at me were beneficial, preferable, advisable, suitable, and tactical, which would take into concern of the budgeting. But that might be a little too direct. But those aren't bad words. Preferable, beneficial, advisable, suitable, tactical.
Does anybody have,
Unfortunately, the first group of words under desirable didn't have a lot to do with libraries.
right? Are any of these preferential to anyone? Does anybody feel that, for me, advisable and preferable jump out if recommended is not the one?
I like those.
Madam Chair, I like recommended because it sounds professional to me, and this is a standard.
Which one did you like? Peggy?
Peggy liked that. She
I
preferred,
like recommended. I prefer recommended as a professional standard.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't see a lot of difference between recommended and advisable, but if I had to weigh, I don't know, I'd go 50-50 either one. They seem comparable.
Madam
advisable.
Chair,
Yes, yes,
I would vote for the word advisable.
Yeah.
That seems more
Fluid.
professional to me, more suitable to the environment that we're in. Recommended strikes me as more colloquial than advisable. I like advisable. It sounds more official. That's it. I like that.
Chris, do you have it?
Madam Chair, advisable and desirable, I think, are the same kind of theme, and that's why they're showing up as synonyms. It's aspirational rather than formal, and that's why I'd lean to recommended. It does. We're not sending a message. We're not telling people what they have to do, but we're saying we recommend you achieve these hours. It's rather than being desired or advised. This is the recommendation from the commission, and so that's the one that came to my mind first, and I think makes the most sense if we are going to change the heading on that column. But I think that discussion.
Yep. And you're balancing it with minimum. Remember that. You're saying these are the minimum requirements and what goes comfortably with that. This is the aspirational. I like that. This is the advisable to get to. This is profitable or preferable. That maybe is what your community considers preferable. It's up to your community. Is it preferable to them?
No. Madam Chair, the difference between advising and recommending, there may not be much of a difference there. It may be, if the goal is to ensure that this right-hand column is the goal, then an adjustment from desirable, I think we're all in agreement there. So finding the right word among advisable and recommended may be not worth
Okay,
all of our time.
right, but is recommended just a little bit more forceful.
It is, and it sounds like it's coming from the top down.
Which is the point of the standard.
Right, which is the point of these standards too, I mean, that's what we are here for, is to recommend. So perhaps recommend would be suitable. What do you, I mean, we don't need to keep discussing the word, but we need to come up with one that advisable advisable is kind of like, yes, this is maybe what we want to do. And recommend is, yep, that's what we want to do. I guess a tone of voice. It's a tone.
It is. It's a tone. Aspirational is a little higher level of we're shooting for.
Yeah, it's a little, like you said, loosey-goosey.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to recommend that we go forward into our meeting, our business meeting in December. And I will be happy to recommend that we adopt this rule as written with the amendment to change desirable to recommended.
Okay. I agree. How about everyone else?
I agree.
I
But
agree.
I would also, do we have to decide now if we have to include a comment? Like the governor said, we can include it when we send this message out of your statement?
Yeah, we'll have to give a statement.
Mhm.
Do we do that today?
We'll take your discussion today and summarize it at your December business meeting. Any recommendations that come out of this meeting will be included in your meeting materials. And then you'll formally act on the rulemaking at your December meeting. And then the notice of adoption that the Lieutenant Governor was describing comes after you act on the rulemaking. And it will include the summarized comments from today's meeting and any changes then to the rulemaking process that you decide on in December. Does that make
But
sense?
I would like to carry through on, Carmen did make a motion and I would like to second it because that's one thing we can clean up before then if we have agreement. If we don't have agreement, there's no need. But if we have agreement, let's clean up the one thing. Desirable to recommended was the motion, right, Carmen? And I'd second it.
Not really a motion, Tammy. I was trying to let everyone listening know that that's my conclusion to this work session. I will be happy to go forward into our business meeting in December and make a motion that will have these things in it. I'm concluding for myself my thoughts about the rule change and the comments on it. That's what I was doing. But in this work session, we're not going to have any motions and seconds and votes.
Right.
I was just trying to let everybody know what I envisioned that I would be willing to carry forward into our business meeting.
Go for it.
You want me to repeat that? Okay, I will recommend at our business meeting, I will be happy to make a motion that we adopt this rule change as amended. And the amendment will be to change that column heading from desirable to recommended.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could
Yes.
I ask a question of the state librarian? How often is this rule revisited or reviewed by the commission? How often has it been updated?
Typically, we review the standards about every 10 years. This particular rule was most recently reviewed in 2021.
Was it changed at all?
No.
Not changed.
The reason I say that and the logic behind Commissioner Burnett's amendments here, reduction in number of visits, commensurate the number of hours being set for the minimum. If that were to tick back up, is there a way to have the commission review those hours more frequently? In my experience at Helena College, starting a year ago, last week, November 4th, we expanded the hours starting January of 2025 after I had started, and we saw an increase in the number of visitors. We saw an increase in the number of books checked out we're both an academic library for the students here, as well as a public library for the residents of Helena and Broadwater, Jefferson County. And so when we increased hours, and I've seen that increase over the past year, roughly 5% number of books checked out, maybe it's about 11% increase in foot traffic. That's caused us to adjust our resources, as many of the commissioners are describing, reallocating resources based on that increase that we've seen. If we were to more frequently revisit these hours or tie the hours to certain data, or trigger a review based on data, or have a set review every 2 years following each legislative session, tying it to some aspect of the state's calendar that says we'll review these hours and the minimums, and have that written into the rule so that there is a more frequent review to perhaps address some of the comments we've received, but also make sure they're accurate in reflecting the patron behaviors and library operations. Is that something, and the Lieutenant Governor signed off, but is that something that we could consider placing in the rule, that in subsection 1, that the number of weekly hours be reviewed by the commission on an annual basis? I know that's a component of another rule change we're talking about, having it reviewed, if not annually, every other year. That's a possibility.
Madam Chair, it's certainly possible to add language about review of this or any standard. One of the ideas that I've thought about over the years is having a stated review of the standards that aligns with the reauthorization of the public state aid to public libraries, which is tied to the standard. That reauthorization typically happens on a 6-year cycle.
So that's just an idea. I don't know if the other commissioners have any reaction to that. If there's a possibility of building in an automatic review, it's certainly something I would be open to, just so we don't let a rule be reliant upon one commissioner's attempts to keep things on track and keep things accurate. It would require the whole commission to take those items into account. So it's a thought about making sure it does remain accurate without the vigilance of one commissioner.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it is my recollection that this whole ball got rolling because a library approached Commissioner Burnett. So the impetus to do this came from a library, and Commissioner Burnett can correct me if that's wrong. So and that makes sense to me. The rules are there to serve the libraries and serve the taxpayers by ensuring that the state aid goes to good libraries and not a P.O. box somewhere. So it makes sense to me that we would respond to libraries' concerns, and that's what started this. It's my understanding it didn't come from a commissioner, it came from a library that wanted us to look at this.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
for the record, it was just a statistical analysis that triggered my suggestion for the change. And we have a lot of rules. We could put them all on a tighter review frame, but maybe the 6-year time frame might satisfy Commissioner Goss's thinking, and it would be more in keeping with some event that happens to us and pushes us into looking at data, and that would be a way of a trigger instead of just waiting around until somebody thinks of something or finds something in the data individually.
Again, I would state, I think it's very clear. I think it gives local libraries more control. I think it's really well written. I think there's a lot of variety in there, all the way from minimum to, well, whatever we decide, recommended or aspirational. I think it's not, I don't see a need to bring it back. Unless something strange happens where somebody comes to, and then we can always bring it back. A different commission can bring it back. I wouldn't write into there that it necessarily has to be brought back, because I think we're clarifying something that need clarifying and putting the responsibility where it should go. And I'm actually surprised at how few comments we had on this particular issue. I know we had quite a few, but not like we've had in the past on certain things, which makes me think there are some people that are concerned for valid reasons. Some people are concerned because they just get concerned about things. And some people maybe don't know what our motive is. That's one of the things I heard when we talked to people on the phone, well, when people called in. But I wouldn't make a bigger thing out of this than it is. I don't see it as complicated. I think we've addressed the issues that were valid. And
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I hesitate to write a review schedule into the rule itself, but I acknowledge the concern that not only the library world, but everything related to reading and writing is extremely fluid. Publishing as well is constantly changing. So, you know, I completely agree that it's unlikely that these rules will stand for the next 20 years or whatever without needing to be adjusted, because the world around us and the world around reading and books is changing terribly fast and all the time. And libraries need to keep in touch with all these changes. And I know we as libraries, talking about Flathead County, we do. Our librarians are very aware of changes and what's going on. So we need to stay nimble. And having said that, I don't think we should write a schedule into the rule itself. I'm not comfortable with doing that. But we could certainly on the commission's yearly tasks or biannually laid out tasks, add something to our own schedule that we should look. Maybe we should poll our libraries. Do any of our rules cause you concern? Have you bumped up against any of them lately? So that we can stay on top of the changes. I think that would be a good idea.
We could add that to our goals. We could add, you're right, to our 2026, or, continuing on to our goals. That would be a good thing for us to do. Are there any
Madam
further-
Chair, I
Yeah.
agree, or even just a future discussion about the standards process and the number of years, and maybe tying it to something as Tom suggested. So I think we're ready to move on.
I agree. Are we in agreement that recommended should be that word rather than desirable? That's my question.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think that waits for a motion. I suggest that we do that. The motion is at the December meeting.
Lieutenant Governor Juris said that it didn't. Correct. That we could change a word without a motion.
No, she said we could do it at this meeting with a motion.
You can recommend at this meeting what change you want to propose for your December meeting.
So what I need to know is recommended the word for us to vote on.
I like it, but that's a pre-motion and it's not part of Robert's rules or.
she's just asking.
I'm just asking.
No objection.
I like recommended.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so we'll go on now to the certification education administrative rule. there were a number of concerns. I did not see any proponents for this rule change. Okay, so these are these are the concerns that I detected from all of the letters, all of the public comment that was sent in. The following concerns reflect public testimony and feedback from Montana librarians, trustees, and community stakeholders. Okay, here's the proposed rule would require MSL pre-approval for all continuing education programs. There would be an elimination of local selection of CE providers and topics, removes external resources, including college courses, MSU Extension, PNLA, ARSL, PLA webinars, vendor training like OCLC, MACO, MMIA events, LinkedIn Learning, other state libraries, and local trainings like CPR, shooter leadership. There'd be a removal of dedicated trustee and staff training tracks, provides no approval standards or timely process for last minute opportunities, offers no recertification path after required courses are completed, potentially forcing repeated topics, and possibly an undue pressure on MSL staff for program creation and review, reducing flexibility for community-specific needs and peer networking. And so what I hear, we all want, of course, all certified librarians to stay sharp and ready to serve. Okay, and what I'm hearing are people say that this rule takes away local choice, adds red tape without better results, and cuts off good training right when our libraries need more options. Towns with different needs. We have a lot, that was a huge, like Missoula is totally different from Miles City, based on population size, community makeup, demographics. So what we need to do is figure out where to go with this rule change.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one comment I would like to make is this, the certification of librarians is one of the few things the commission is required to do. So it's something we're supposed to grapple with. It's something we're supposed to do. So I just want to put that out there as my very first thought.
Yeah, that is that's one of our duties, our regulatory duties.
Yes. Yes.
I would like to respond, if I may, to the point that I agree with Madam Chair. That was what I heard the most and read the most in the comments was that people were afraid they wouldn't have as much freedom as they've had before. They did say the thing about cities are different, and Missoula is different than a little town in Muscle I would point out that the basic courses that we're requiring, for example, the law, it doesn't change. It doesn't matter if you're in Muscle or Missoula. Open meeting law is open meeting law. And it doesn't matter, ADA law is ADA law. And so sometimes I think that's a bit of a red herring. The workshops on basic, how to budget, what you go through, the steps, what kind of relationship you need with your trustee, how that's set up, how to work with trustees, how to follow the law. Those workshops are set and it doesn't change. I do think it's very important, and I'm sort of one of the people that this has been an impetus for the 4 years I've been on. So as I've told people will call about this, if you want to shoot at someone, shoot at me, because I'm really concerned about we as a commission had not fulfilled our legal responsibility to the CE credits. We are required to do certification and recertification, and we have to set that. and that is a law. And we have passed that off on the staff or passed it off on nobody. And it has swung way too far. And we need to bring it back. And that's always a little difficult because you're making a change there. But that change has to take place. The question is, what's the best way to do it? I really respect the committee. And I think we worked very hard on this to be fair, to take in libraries, to take in trustees. One valid comment that I did hear was, but are you requiring trustees to take the training? And what we found as a legal opinion is we are not required. We do not have the authority to require trustees. We can encourage trustees. We require librarians but head librarians, but not the trustees. But we are certainly encouraging them to take the tract. And I think that's a new approach because in the past, there has been more of a philosophy that the trustees are not part of this process and should almost stay out of it. And I think that's not this current board's opinion. This current board has great respect for the trustees and what they do. I think we had also gotten to the point where we were depending on the, when you're offering 38 to 40 classes, and nobody knows what they are, who they're provided for, what their content is, who's providing it, what they're doing in it. That's not acceptable. That's not meeting our legal obligation. It's putting too much on staff. I think our proposals are very reasonable, that predominantly we offer classes from the staff. And if anything outside of their expertise needs to be offered, they will bring us somebody who they believe will meet that need, along with a class curriculum, and that there will be testing and what it will be and how we'll check the outcomes. And then it's up to the commission to approve it. Somebody asked, how often can you do that? As often as we need. We can meet like we're doing right now. I don't see it as being a big problem. Yes, there'll be fewer classes in the beginning, but we have to start somewhere. And we're not starting these new rules till next summer. So they got time to catch up on the ones they're doing now. But structurally, this was a train that was running off the tracks. And we were supposed to be driving it. So there's no doubt in my mind we have to get back into that locomotive and drive it.
Madam
And I
Chair,
agree. Go ahead, Carmen.
just to give a little bit more background, the certification program as it was a bit of a free-for-all with really zero oversight.
Yes.
And what's changing, I think there's a basic misunderstanding. We are not trying to change it to where the state library teaches all the classes.
No, we're
From
not.
some of the comments, my impression is that that's how people interpreted it. And we need to correct that. And maybe that's in the wording, I don't know. But that's not the gist of this. The gist of it is that the state library maintains a catalog of excellent classes, and people aiming for certification will pick from that pre-approved catalog. What I'm hoping is going to happen when a change takes effect is that our poor person in charge of the CE program will be inundated with suggestions from libraries and library directors as to what should be added for the catalog, to the catalog of classes. And we'll have to go through those suggestions and put all the great suggestions into the new catalog, but then it's the catalog that you will pick from to take your classes. So the intention is not for the state library to teach everything. That's impossible, because there's a lot of expertise out there that state library employees do not have. and that are already out there as classes and proficient teachers that we want to make use of. So I want to make sure that misunderstanding is addressed. This is not a move to have only classes taught by the state library in the catalog of choices for certification.
Thank you, Carmen. That is very much a great clarification. So Calay's job will be huge. But if she was part of the committee, so perhaps she is up for that. Is Calay on?
I'm not sure, I can't see.
Calay, are you on? She must not be.
It will be a huge undertaking the first few years because we're making major changes that must be made. But those changes that we will see a minimizing of that amount of changing and bringing it to us, and working out the classes. And
so librarians or whoever can recommend, say, the from the rural library. Oh, what is that? What's the acronym? ARSL. Somebody will say, this is a great class from ARSL, or we have somebody that's teaching CPR, and if it'll come to Calay, or will it come before the committee? Who will be making that final decision? Will every class come through you through the committee, or will it come through Calay?
No, it'll come, if it's not the staff doing it, it will come to the board, to the commission.
To the commission.
And, it's not going to be, I don't see it being, we talked about, there's no problem with Mako classes or whatever classes. As long as they're going to bring it to us and they're going to say, there has to be this need. It has to fit under this category, and it has a need. It has an accepted professor. It has a curriculum. And it has an outcome check. And then we allow it.
Okay, is there a rubric that you will be using?
I'm sure we'll have something at that. Well, it'll be all of us. So yes, of course we'll have something.
That's just a question. I was just wondering.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think the committee with Tracy and Calay on there, we have worked on creating that. We're not completely done with that part.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And I think out of the state library will already, in a first iteration, come a catalog with a lot of outside classes in there. The MSU extension does a really great job on the open meeting law classes. So I expect the beginning catalog already to have a lot of stuff in it that is not just the state library taught courses.
Great. Okay.
Another thing I would like to address, there were comments that we need a director track and a trustee track and a librarian track. And it just made me think, the only one required, even in the current system, is the director.
Yes.
The other ones are voluntary. So the trustee track was there, but it was voluntary. So we're not changing, because we're not by law required to do that. We're required to certify directors. We don't want to change who has to take it. That would not be appropriate for us to change that. But it makes me wonder whether we should call it not the director's track, but simply the certification track. And then it would actually be in the purview of the local library to say, we really encourage all our trustees to take the certification track. And we only call it a certification track because some people might just say, well, I'm a trustee. Why would I take the director track? So maybe if we call it simply the one and only certification track, and leave it up to local libraries making recommendations as to who beyond the director should take it.
Okay, and they could even make their own recommendations of how many credits they would need to get.
Yeah, that is completely voluntary. So your local library could say, we require all our trustees to take these 5 basic classes. and create your own trustee track for your local community that you think is really necessary based on what you have seen with your incoming trustees, what they do and do not know.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Just clarifying that the library staff does not direct the trustees.
correct.
So trustees would make the decision about their own requirements.
The board would, yes, each trustee board would. Mhm.
And they're accountable to the people, the elected people who have appointed them.
Right. Mhm.
Madam Chair,
Just a second, Peggy. Chris,
go ahead.
Thanks, Commissioner Taylor. Question for the state librarian as to how this would affect the MLS certification. Would the transcript of the recent graduate who has completed the master's in library science, would they submit that to the commission for review or is that going to be an option anymore under the new proposed program? That's how I was certified when completing my degree 2 years ago. And is that still going to be an option?
That's a good question, and I don't know that we have clarified whether or not that would still be an option.
Anyway, just a thought that I had.
Sure sounds logical to me.
Well, we have not clarified that it would be automatic. There are classes that are offered by the Montana Library Association that we are free to approve and maybe would and maybe wouldn't. For example, there were many courses they offered that had to do with DEI, and that would cost us our funding. So we would recommend against those. So no, it's not automatic.
Commissioner Hall, my question was whether when I completed my Master of Library Information Studies degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I was eligible for certification for 4 years through the Montana State Library. Would a person who completed their library degree still have that option once they've earned the master's degree by virtue of submitting the courses taken to the commission for approval? Or would the earning of the degree consistent with that institution of higher education certification?
This has nothing to do with approving or not approving your degree. This is certification and recertification of classes. Whether or not your degree is certified would be back at your university.
The degree is the basis for the certification, I guess is my question.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think this issue did come up, if memory serves, during one of our committee meetings, and we were grappling with how much of the catalog is going to be Montana specific and how much is just standard library service. And it makes complete sense to me that we give consideration to people who come in with a degree, because it would be ridiculous to make them take a class on basic cataloging. You know, that would be ludicrous. So we need to pursue that further in committee, how we would approve degrees or parts of a degree, or if we needed to require anything else for initial certification. And we're also grappling with recertification and what that would look like. But I agree with the commissioner that we need to look at that as well, and we have. I don't know that we have come to a conclusion on this, but automatically, retroactively saying yes to any class taken, that is what we're trying to no longer do, because that was not the commission doing its job and the state library doing its job of certifying our local library directors. And we're trying to get back to that actual process and actually do it. In the course of this, we've also proposed reducing the required hours, with the thought behind it that our job is to ensure quality service in order, again, to make sure that the state aid monies, taxpayer monies, go to good libraries. And in the course of that, what we need to ensure is really good basic service. And we're trying to cut the hours back in exchange for tightening the reins on what is actually necessary for a good library director to know. And so it's a bit of a trade-off in proscribing more what needs to be taken, but requiring less. And my thought in supporting this is it is more valuable and more appropriate to demand basic proficiency and leave more, I don't know, innovative or elective stuff up to the individual libraries. And that was my thought. It can't be a free-for-all because then the commission's not doing its job. And it needs to ensure quality so that the funds the state library hands out to libraries goes to good libraries.
Okay, Commissioner Taylor, you had a comment and
That's fine. That's fine. This is a complex topic for me because I was involved in education and had 30 years of continuing education as a teacher. And then on the administrative part, that was responsible for organizing that continuing ed. And it's a fine line finding something that everyone will be happy with. And so I admire this committee for their hard work on developing this process. One of the comments that I picked up on was from Abby, and she said that she understood the concerns for the relevance of some of the credits. And I think that's the key point here is we want to be sure that it's just not personal growth that they're working towards, but something that applies to the library. And I think this catalog is a step in that direction. The other point I want to make is that we might need to really get the message out that what is the process for sending in the courses that could be in that catalog so that they're not so concerned about it's only going to be the state library courses.
yes, I agree that we need to get that word out. It's new to me that there was going to be a huge catalog like this, but that to me is quite the selling point. We've had a few questions. What about classes that pop up? I mean, like some of the librarians said, well, I heard about a class 2 days ago and needed to, and thought that'd be a great class for me to take. What about something like that? Just sorry, or
Yeah, I think, sorry, apply for it next year.
how about, okay, and what about like local courses from the police on CPR, active shooter, courses like that, safety? That
I
was
think timely courses and courses about safety and that kind of thing. If they came before the commission, they would be approved if they met those standards.
But like sometimes, you know, the local, like in our county, somebody will say, hey, we're gonna have, our ambulance is going to be training on CPR, and we're gonna do it on tomorrow. So would those types of courses be okayed in hindsight or not, or no?
Don't know.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
they would not be approved in hindsight, but I would like to make the point here that we are not forbidding anybody from taking any class.
No.
We are cutting down the required hours for certification precisely because of this. We want to cover the most important basics, and we want to make it pre-approved so that we have some oversight and it's not the free-for-all it has been, which was not useful.
Right.
But if you know, if we are cutting the requirements down, then that frees up hours for you to take whatever you want. We don't want to keep you from doing that. Anything that's interesting and possibly good for your library, we don't want you not to take those classes, which is why we're cutting the required hours down. So if you want to invest the same amount of time in your education as you're doing right now to be certified, we're freeing you up to do that by requiring fewer classes, and then you can take a class that's only announced 24 hours ahead, but it will not count towards certification.
Okay, and what I saw was a concern about librarians saying, well, we don't have, my budget is small, I don't have that many hours. So what I want is classes that would lead to certification. So there, you know, there is, even though it is said, you can go ahead and take whatever class you want, they're saying, well, I don't have that time in reality to be taking the courses. So do you see what I mean? They're saying, yeah, the committee is saying, yes, go ahead and take that class, but they feel like it's basically saying, well, go ahead and take it, but it's not gonna count, so. But they don't feel they have the time, and they don't feel they have the resources.
I think that's kind of a red herring. I think this is the way people do these classes. There's a board that, you know, we had in the OPI, and they were saying, oh, well, they were pretty loosey-goosey, and they sat there and talked to us and said, well, we have classes that have been approved, and schools do this and that. And then you all heard the blow up the last 2 weeks because they were offering classes that were absolutely unjustifiable in any society that wants to protect children. And some of those courses were so out of line. And now all of a sudden they're looking up and saying, uh-oh, these classes have to be rejustified. We have to pull this back in. We had gotten some classes and the reality is we cannot vet and approve 39 classes that librarians can take, and nor do we. And again, they can take classes. I envision, and I'm sure Carmen would agree, there are cases where a library might say, you know, we've got a really big group of people this year getting into fly tying and fly fishing. Let's put on a course for that. Well, they aren't going to come to us for that because that's their library offering something for their folks. You know, then maybe the next year they go, hey, you know what, this is a really good class. Maybe we should talk to Jenny about making this available. And we'll look at it. I think these things can be a concern, but right now I think they're more trying to take the system and fit it back into an old system where everything was approved, acceptable, and did not satisfy what the law expects us to do as the commissioners who are responsible for this.
And the
Madam
proposed
Chair?
hours, just a second, the proposed hours are 20 credits. Sorry, 20 credits within the first year of employment, and then 60 credits within 5 years, correct? That is what, someone had a question, so I was just saying. So 20 years within the first year of employment, and then 60 within 5. So that includes the 20 also, correct?
Now I'm not sure. I wish I had Colette or Tracy to confer with.
Yeah, Jenny has it right here. It's, yeah, and that's what it says. So
Okay,
he's going to send it to Victoria to put up on the screen.
thank you.
I'm assuming that's what you're doing. Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to address your example with the ambulance, the way I would see that filtering down to the certification is that that library director would contact the state library and say, hey, we had this opportunity and it made me realize how much we need first aid training. And then the state library would respond and say, well, we'll see if we can find great online training in first aid that we can add to our catalog, or if we know somebody in Montana, like MSU Extension for Open Meeting Law, that is an expert and teaches this already, and we'll see if we can add them to the course catalog. So I agree, those spur of the moment things, they would not count towards certification. But again, I would encourage the local library director to say, hey, we'll get a sub in here, or we'll cut our, we'll close the library an hour early on that Tuesday so that my librarian can go and take this hands-on first aid training. We don't want to keep you from doing that, but it's not required and would not count towards your certification.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I hope the leaf blowers outside aren't making too much noise, but I'll just go through a few things that I wrote down, notes on the side. Core skills and topics are the object of the simplification. And if locally chosen, then these enhancements would apply, which we heard quite a few people worrying about local control and the needs of their particular library in their geography. And that is covered by the core concept with enhancements added at the local library level. There's one respondent or group of respondents said that the 20 hours of initial certification in 1 year may be too much for a new director, but that's out of the scope of our discussion right now. That would be a new rule, but it's certainly something for us to keep in the back of our mind. We saw a lot of comments about this public safety or this safety training, CPR and police and active shooter.
Right.
And so those are things that can be supplied in the core, the core courses.
It is in the core.
Yeah.
They're already in the core, all those classes.
Okay.
Okay.
A mechanism for approval, the approval process, I think, is countenanced in the proposed rule. One respondent said it is a waste of time to take a course and learn nothing new just for the credits. Boy, we do not want to impose any of that on people. CPR, first aid, active shooter. So local trustees, governance ends up with more authority under the proposed rule change to tailor to the needs of the town and the county. Those are some of the things that I took away from reading through the comments. And I'm going to leave it about 10:05 or 11:05.
Madam Chair?
Just a second. Carmen, go ahead.
I would like to address the useless repetitive class issue. And we talked about this too. And one of the concepts we had that the state library would do internally with this catalog is after each legislative session, I'm sure there will be classes about local law and library law and what has happened in the legislative session. So a course like that would be adjusted every 2 years as something changes. So we are working in the committee, we're working hard to make sure that there's not, here's your 10 classes and you're going to have to take the same ancient class again in 5 years. That's a concern that we have grappled with as well, and we're well aware of this. We don't want to create a useless, repetitive program where you take the classes just to check them off and have them done. It needs to remain relevant, and it needs to, the catalog needs to remain flexible enough to be relevant when you go in 5 years down the road to recertify. And
Madam Chair? Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Carmen.
Just one more plea. If you are a library director and you're listening right now, please realize that this catalog is not meant to be static, and give the state library down the road constant feedback on the catalog and help the state library keep that catalog of classes relevant. It just needs to happen with pre-approval instead of, I took this and after the fact now I want it to count for certification.
One comment was keep it flexible and fluid, which is what you are saying, Commissioner Cuthbertson. Okay, now, Peggy, did you have a comment?
I did. I'm looking at the wording and it says MSL staff will request to present course proposals for approval at a regular commission meeting following the schedule for public notice. Now, Tammy said something about having a Zoom meeting or a work session. Does regular commission meeting mean only our
We talked about that,
meetings?
and we thought we pretty much would have them at regular meetings. But if they call up and say, the state law enforcement is offering for teachers and libraries a class on that stuff that counters, the drug overdose.
Mhm.
What
Ar-
I'm missing, Archicam. whatever.
Narcan or
Yeah.
whatever.
They're offering a class in a week that Narcan and how to use it and whatever, and it would be helpful. We could have a Zoom meeting and discuss it. So I think that that's not the way it will always work, but it can be that way. Again, there's going to be some growing pains, and I also don't want to sugarcoat this. We talked very honestly about it. There will be classes that people take that haven't changed as much as they wish, like the laws in Montana, and they take it 4 years later, and some of the laws are repeated, but some of them are changed. That's going to happen with teacher certification. That's going to happen with plumbing certification. That's going to happen with doctor certification. Sometimes some of the classes, and somebody else said, well, I don't want to make my assistant library take a class in budgeting because that's not her job. And I said, well, maybe she might want to be a librarian someday, a head librarian, and she will be glad she has that course. Maybe she doesn't see herself going there, but it might be helpful. Carmen, I think, suggested if you get trustees who haven't signed up for classes before, a librarian might opt to take that class because they want to take it with their trustee and be together with them and learn at the same time, even though one of them is the librarian has more information. So, I just think we have to know that it's going to be a little uncomfortable at first, but I believe it's going to work and it's going to be to everybody's advantage. And I don't think the system we had was very fair to staff. I think we had put staff in a very tenuous position where all these things were being asked to be approved after the fact. And it had gotten kind of, okay, well, we will. And, our staff deserves better than that.
Another big question was the MLA.
And we can, yeah. Go ahead.
And if classes from the MLA will be accepted.
Not necessarily, maybe they will. Again, it will depend on the class.
So those will be looked at, the classes.
Those will be looked at.
Before
Yeah.
the conference.
Again, I go back to it. Some of the classes offered by MLA would put us in a situation of losing funding from the federal government with the mandates on DER, diversity, equity, and so inclusion, DEI. So we couldn't offer them.
Madam Chair?
Yes. I have a hard time saying Carmen. I'm going to say Carmen.
I would like to point out that the state library in no way, with changing these requirements, proscribes what any organization teaches anywhere. All we're dealing with is proscribing what counts for certification.
Yes.
So we're not telling the MLA or anybody else what they should or shouldn't teach. I just want to make that point very, very clear. All we're talking about is what counts for state library certification.
We're not
Where do
holding
we-
feet over the fire, saying you have to teach this or we're,
No,
okay,
No,
okay. I saw Commissioner Goss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few observations, I guess. There's a lot of questions about how this adjustment would work and acknowledgement that there would be some growing pains as the changeover were to be implemented if the rule change was to be adopted. And I think the concerns that seem to rise through the public comment is the fact that those questions may not have answers yet, which creates unpredictability for local library boards, directors, and staff. And that unpredictability can have a big impact on budgeting. If we look at the statutes on the powers and duties of trustees in 22-1-309 and the role of the chief librarian in 22-1-310, those specifically talk about the trustees having the management of the library budget, and that the chief librarian serves at the pleasure of the board. And that's reflected in the current rule at 10-102-1160, that the board adopts a sufficient budget for continuing education. And if we have this unpredictability and growing pains in how the program is going to be adjusted, I'm worried about that unpredictability having difficulty or creating difficulty for boards establishing that continuing education budget. And so I understand that there's a delay in the implementation until I think the summer of 2026. Is that a sufficient time for local libraries to make that changeover as they adopt a continuing education budget for a catalog of programs that would be adopted by the commission for the coming library fiscal year? Do they know then what's available? Is that adoption creating the flexibility that's intended, or is it a central planning that is creating a top-down expectation for library boards to meet, even though they may not know what the courses will be? And so I don't know if there's a way to delay this, Madam Chair, the vote on this until some of these questions are answered more thoroughly, or if there's a possibility of delaying the implementation if it were to be adopted, to give boards the ability to adopt that initial budget based on the catalog of courses that will be available, or if there's additional clarity that can be created to reassure boards, because we've heard that this isn't the intent, this isn't the goal, this is the goal, but there's still these questions that remain. I don't know if a delay is advisable or possible, but it seems like there's an opportunity to offer that reassurance before it's voted upon or even implemented. So just an observation that I had.
Chris, I would like to respond to that. Having sat where you are, not being on a committee that comes to us with a study, I have responded exactly as you did. Well, did you? We did investigate all of these issues over about 3-4 month time with many long hours, going through every one of these questions at length. And what we are doing right now is what you said you wanted done. We had all these committee meetings, all that were open. We got the information out. Now we've had public calling in. Now we're discussing it like this. We will be reading what they bring in. And then we have to move forward at some point. I think somebody who's not involved in the process, whether that be you not on the committee or a librarian in one of the towns that just wasn't, they're always going to have questions. And no program we come up with will be perfect. But we have to start, because even our staff said they were embarrassed by what this continuing education had turned into. And we can't let that continue. And we're all responsible to make it more professional. And I believe our librarians are very responsible and very professional. And I think they want that standard. And even the ones who have talked to me, and I've given them examples of what some of the problems were, they were mortified that certain classes were approved. So I think we just have to move forward, but we'll do it by the law. We'll do it with the process, with the committee of Carmen, myself, and McKenna, and 3 staff members who were phenomenal and gave us all kinds of input, writing, rewriting, writing, studying, talking about it, analyzing it, listening to the public, what they had to say, and doing this today, and then bringing it around, and then let's try it. Let's go forward. And we're not doing it till next summer. So I don't want to delay it more than that. I think a year is long enough. And we can't delay it every time we have a new person question it. But with respect to the fact that being where you are, I would have had the same questions. I think I'm asking that you have to trust that some of us really answered or did research on this. And if I get short and make it sound like I'm not being respectful because we have answered these questions, that's on me, and I apologize for that.
No apology necessary, Commissioner Hall. I completely understand the role of committees and the division of labor. And as a new commissioner, I think the questions I had are natural, as you acknowledge. So no offense taken at all. The question emerges though is, does the commission have to move forward? I understand you've created work, but is that bureaucratic inertia enough of a requirement to say, yes, we have to do this just because we started something? Sometimes when I start a project and I realize that maybe it needs a little bit more work, don't just plow ahead because I started it. I don't want to admit that maybe it was a concern that what I didn't anticipate. And so that's all. That's the question I have is just.
Yeah, that's a good question.
We don't have to vote right away. There could be some more examination that's possible, because that idea of central planning and top-down requirements is difficult for me as someone who does trust local governments and worked with local governments for a long time. Implementing that type of central standards from Helena that have to go statewide is difficult. And if it's going to happen consistent with the role of the commission in law, then it should be done very carefully, because we don't want to be perceived as grabbing power and then dictating to local government.
Good point.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Cuthbertson.
Question for Jenny. If we decide we need more time, how does the process lengthen compared to where we are now in the process?
Commissioner Cuthbertson, I would want to check with the Lieutenant Governor, but I believe that there's a process where we could amend the rule notice to extend the rulemaking process.
Can you tell me who the staff members were? Were they Kara, Tracy, and Colette?
Mm-hmm.
Kara Urban.
I think it was me.
Hold on.
Tracy Collet and I was providing guidance.
Jenny.
As well.
Oh, okay. Not Kara.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Mm.
Another question, this one to our state librarian. Jenny, did you get the impression that there will be any financial consequences to this change? To an individual library and their training budget?
I think the concern that was raised was primarily about ensuring that there was continuing education funding to attend conferences, whether that's MLA or the Association of Rural and Small Libraries, and that if attending those conferences would not result in certification, the budget might not be warranted.
I think that would then be an important point to take back to the committee, that when we work out the details, that we have that we give special consideration to conferences happening, because from a librarian's point of view, it's very efficient. You know, instead of traveling here for a CPR class and traveling there for another one-time class, if you can hit several classes and several credits by going to a conference, that's very efficient. So that financial concern makes a lot of sense to me. And that's something that the committee did not discuss, specifically classes at conferences. And I think we need to, as a committee, discuss that. But that's part of the details of how the catalog comes together that we need to work out anyways. So putting that into our hopper, I think, does not warrant halting the process at this point. But I think it's a very valid special concern that we need to incorporate into the details that we still need to work out with regard to how to insert classes into the catalog that's available.
I think we did discuss that because we discussed, could they take classes at Mako? Could they take classes and we said, again, they announce their classes a long time in advance. I mean, they announce them months and months in advance, and they could have easily come to us and say, there's going to be this new workshop this year. Might have been one we approved last year. And different people want to take it now. But then on the other hand, it may be a new class. And we discussed, yeah, that we could, you know, they could come to us with that class and justify, yeah, this sounds really good. Our staff can't teach that. They'd like to go.
So maybe as a final comment from my point of view, what the really big change is it's the pre-approved. It's no longer, I see this, I take it, I want to have it count towards certification after the fact. To me, the biggest change is you have to plan more if you want to have a class count for certification. You do not have to plan if you simply want to take a class. Again, we're not prescribing what any entity out there needs to teach during their conference. But it's a step from the free-for-all salad that it was, really, to a pre-approval process. And I think it's crucial if we as a commission want to do our required job of certifying library directors.
I have to go off for another doctor meeting, so I will listen later. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Appreciate all of you.
See you later. Good luck.
Madam Chair, just another concept observation. To address the pre-approval process and perhaps the timing issue that can emerge is that the commission could adopt and has adopted fixed standards that are embedded in the first paragraph of the amendment, that it has to meet those standards that are outlined in the subchapter of the administrative rules. And if you set forth that expectation for staff can only approve items that are within that standard or within that set of standards, then the commission is honoring its obligation by saying, these are what we want the classes to meet. These are the topics we want. These are the core issues, the standards that we've adopted. Classes can only meet that. If that's the rule, then the staff would have to honor it. You could still have an approval of what was a review of what was approved by the staff consistent with those standards without having the commission being required to meet to approve courses. So sometimes setting that expectation that staff have to follow. You are an employee of the state library. You have to follow the law. The law through the regulation is to approve programs that meet those standards. And we'll check your work at the end of each fiscal year. That would be a way to maybe address this as well. So maybe it's a page 2 of the notice of proposed rulemaking. And so just a concept or a thought that maybe there's a way to balance these two concerns, have the commission honor its role under the law, while still giving the staff the flexibility to approve things on a timely basis. That's then checked later and say, this looks good. We followed the rule, or maybe there's some changes for the future as to what our advice would be. So that would remove the need for the commission to meet more than it needs to review and approve courses, but also honoring the flexibility of local opportunities, local decisions of local trustees that are consistent with the previously adopted standards.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Commissioner Cuthbertson, go ahead.
I wonder if that's kind of what we had and it went off the rails because of lack of oversight or involvement from the commission. I think that's the commission's fault that it went off the rails. I personally feel that a once a month opportunity to propose something to be added to the catalog seems like a very timely way of doing it. I'm assuming any other professional plans their continuing education more than 30 days in advance because they have to take time off and put it in their schedule to go do training. I don't see the commission having weekly special meetings to approve classes. That is ridiculous. But a report on what's being proposed to add to the catalog at every one of our regular meetings doesn't seem to be burdensome to me or unreasonable to expect that professionals would plan their continuing education a month ahead.
So we would be having commission meetings once a month. So on our off months, we would be having a Zoom meeting. Is that what the proposal is?
Well, maybe, or maybe after a year or two, this would calm down and there wouldn't be so many new proposals. I really don't know. But I completely agree with Commissioner Hall that we do need to try something new because what we had was absolutely ludicrous.
Yes, I agree. Go ahead.
That's
Just a second. Jenny
Yeah.
had something.
I was gonna respond regarding the thought about conference programs and how they would qualify for certification. I think having conference programs that are determined to meet the criteria that the commission is considering is important. It's one way to keep that catalog fresh and current and relevant. And to Commissioner Cuthbertson's point is a good use of financial resources. I would see the need for some special meetings when the programs for various conferences are announced. You know, some of the smaller conferences, those programs might be announced just within a few weeks or a month of the conference proceedings. So I think that would be something that we would have to expect. And including MLA. Oftentimes the MLA program is not ready for your February meeting. And so it's likely in that event that we would need to hold a special meeting to review and consider the content of the MLA program and which of those courses would qualify for sort of the credit.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Question, Jenny. Do you think if half or 3/4 of the classes for the specifically the MLA conference were known beforehand and were approved, and then there's a few that are coming together at the last minute because speakers couldn't come or something changed, do you think that would keep people from attending the conference?
I would certainly hope not. I would certainly hope not.
Follow-up question. I'm not familiar with the other local conferences or Montana-wide conferences that librarians would go to. So there's the MLA, and then there is what other organizations that put on librarian conferences?
Librarian-specific conferences, some of I think MLA is the only state conference that has library-specific programming. There's also the Mountain Plains Library Association, which is a regional conference, and the Pacific Northwest Library Association. The Association of Rural and Small Libraries is a national organization that some of our smaller rural libraries like to attend. So those, I think those are the conference programs that we could anticipate wanting to review.
And so some of those conferences take place out of state?
They do.
Okay. So that's a big expense. I'm assuming none of the smaller libraries could ever dream of buying a flight for their director and sending them there, or do they have the budget for that right now?
It depends. Only a handful, I think, attend, but I've certainly seen, the librarian from Valier, for example, at the Association of Rural and Small Libraries when it was in North Dakota.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I guess we'll go from here to our December meeting. Thank you so much to the committee for all the work that you did. Sounds like you really put a lot of hours into this.
Once we started, especially Tracy had a lot of input of stuff we needed to think about, because this is a big ball of wax. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, thank you very much for that. So we'll take this to our December meeting.
I'm not hearing anyone from the committee that wishes to make any suggested changes to the rules. So it's my understanding that the commission wishes to move forward with action on the rules as proposed at your December meeting.
That would be my recommendation.
The only thing that I'm concerned about is that word regular. In that, does that just mean our scheduled meeting? Does that limit us just to our scheduled meetings? Or can we remove that word regular and as a commission meeting that's following public hearing, public notice?
Right, because we had said that possibly we would have a monthly meeting, and that would not be our regular
Yeah.
meeting.
I think we should remove that word regular.
I think that's a good amendment, especially for the beginning phase, as we try to implement the change. One other comment I would like to put out there, especially for the public, is that we are looking at grandfathering in anybody who has started their certification track before this change goes into effect. So if you have taken one class towards your next 5-year certification, you can finish under the old system. Because we thought about this, and it's not fair to hit somebody who has begun their track with a sudden change. So that's another thing that Tracy made us aware of. You need to grandfather in the people who have already started, having planned how they were going to get their certification or recertification. So I want to put that out to anybody who's really concerned as well, that there will be this grandfathering in for people who have started, because we can't make you change, or it doesn't seem fair to make you change what you're doing in the middle of it when you've had expectations of how you're going to get your certification done. So I just want to put that out there as well. That hasn't been mentioned yet. That's also something the commission is discussing as we look towards implementation.
But that includes, they still have to use the same classes as the new system?
That's a detail we still have to talk about. If they have set a plan out for themselves, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go here, and then I'll have all my classes under the old system. We need to find out how many people will be in that boat and have a fair way to deal with them. That's a concern Tracy brought up, and I think it's very valid.
So there are still some details that need to be worked out.
Yeah, implementation, transition, not anything that would be written into the rules, but the internal practical side of some of it as we transition to a new system, yes.
Madam Chairman, then will that report be available to the commissioners before the vote on December 10th?
We can work on that. I think looking at how this process has gone and looking at some of the misunderstandings, I think we, either as a committee or as a whole commission, have not communicated well what we're doing. That's one of the conclusions I take from this. If I'm going to be part of this commission when any other rules come up for a change, I'm going to keep that in mind, that we need to be much more detailed with the communication that goes out to the public as to why this is being done, how this is being done. You know, the law requires the public meeting to collect comments. That may just not be, we may not have put out sufficient information to really get, to really communicate better with the public what we're doing. So if the commission also is not well informed, I agree, the committee should bring a more detailed report to the December meeting. Thank you, Chris. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, thanks. It was just observation. I didn't know if I was behind because I knew I tried to get caught up with the paperwork, but being able to vote on something with all of the information available is important to me. And if we need to wait until February, then maybe.
I don't feel like I had all the information either. In going to Federation meetings, I wasn't prepared to go to the Federation meetings to explain the questions that came up. So that could be another goal, is just making sure that we're all better informed so that we can spread the word in a more positive fashion.
Yep, and I think that's on the committee. We needed to communicate more about all the things we were discussing in our committee meetings.
Okay, well, we will go from here then. I believe that our work session is complete unless there are any more comments. Seeing as there are none, we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all the information brought, and we appreciate everyone's comments, and we'll see you again. Thanks.